All right. Good morning, everybody. We left off in Daf Nun Hey Amud Beis. So Nun Hey, I believe, is Saturday's Daf. Nun Vav is Sundays, which would be yesterday, and today would be Nun Zayin. So the goal is to get onto Nun Zayin. There's a Mishnah on Amud Aleph, halfway down of Amud Aleph. So the goal is to do a blot and a half today. So we'll try to get there to catch us up, and then once again we got to work to get us ahead for this coming weekend. So we are by the two dots on Nun Hey Amud Beis, maybe around five lines from the bottom of the skinny lines. So towards the top of towards the line, there's two dots there. So we mentioned that a city is not, perfectly square, right? It wasn't designed, one time. It wasn't, a big development company created a town. That's not exactly how it went. So you have different structures sticking out. So we talked about gedudos, right? So the Mishnah says if there were gedudos, these towers that were, these ruins, right? They also mentioned towers, but if there were ruins that were 10 high, right? So the Mishnah said, right? They're 10 tefachim high and wide enough so that constitutes the gorse is my gedudos. So what type of ruins are these? These are three walls that do not have any sort of ceiling upon them. See, what about if he has two walls and a roof, right? So yes, it is some sort of structure that's no longer used, right? But it didn't, stop usage because it lost its roof. Rather, it only has two walls and a roof. So is that also considered to be, or a roof, as we say? So which one is it? So Toshma, come and listen. So Elu Shemitabni. So speaking of almost the same discussion we're having as in our Mishnah. So these are the type of structures that are considered to be add-on to the city. So you have nefesh sheyesh bo arba amos al arba amos. If you have a nefesh, which is a tomb, right, and it's built around, that's 4 amos and 4 amos. So that tomb is basically considered to be a chashuv structure that's part of the city that we mentioned, right? Structures that you square off around the city. And, the smallest square you can then encloses all the important structures, i.e. the houses, but also including other structures, such as a tomb, or v'hagesher, or a bridge, v'hakever sheish b'hem beis dira, or a bridge, or a kever, or a place where basic crows, or an area where people are buried, but there is a base dira for a person to watch it, or basic knesset sheish b'beis dira l'chazan, or a base knesset that has also a base dira for a chazan who basically upkeeps the shul, the basic knesses, or you have even a house of idol worship, right? That has a beis dira for their gabai, or stables, or where are storehouses out in the fields that have a beis dira, a dwelling unit. Burganin and huts, Shabasecha, also the huts that are out in the field, Vahabayis, Shabayam, and even a house out in the sea that I guess boats need to go ahead and drop off stuff there. Hare Elu Misabras Ima. These, right, if they are part of the city, even the house in the sea, if it's within a karpe, if it's within 70 and 2/3 amos of the town, these are considered to be part of the town. And they are included when you have to square off to measure the 2,000 amos outside. So you measure it, including, right, the square has to include these structures. And these are going to be a list of ones that are not included, and those are not considered to be important of structures to square around them. So a nefesh, a tomb, that basically has two of its sides broken in, right, which is going to be similar to our question we asked about ruins, right? If you had two walls and a roof. So the hagesher, a kever shein lohem beis dira, or a bridge, or a kever, or a grave that did not have a beis dira, or beis knesset shein beis dira chazan, or beis havos chavim shein lohem beis dira lekamarim, a shul that didn't have basically a dwelling place for its chazan, or for a person to upkeep it, or a house of idol worship that didn't have for their priests. Or storehouses out in the fields that did not have a dwelling unit, and also a pit, a cave, right, and a dish, or a fence, and a dovecote that's with it, or a house that's already not a house out in the sea, but a house on a boat, These are not included as part of the city to go ahead and square around it. It's not considered to be a structure that belongs there. And Ketani Mihas, nevertheless, it says, Nefesh nifritza mishtir chaseh elech v'elech. Right. So it said a tomb that was basically broken on two of its sides. So my lav diga tikra is not talking about something that has a tikra. We're saying with the roof. So now it has a roof and it's not counted. So a roof and two walls, we still see it's not considered to be chashuv. Answers our question. So Gemara says no. This whole price he brought, no, the leka tikra. Maybe it's sorry, there is no tikra. There's just two sides. That is the reason why it's not counted. But maybe if it has two sides and a roof, maybe it would be counted. We don't know. So bais shviyam l'maychazi. What about this house shviyam? What's that fit for you? Summer of Papa, right? People go ahead and basically they switch different things of this and in the svina right out in the ship. They as opposed to docking, so therefore they basically come up to this house and switch stuff out there. And a cave is not included in the city. We have somewhere that says the cave is included. So in other words, the cave is open into a structure, so that structure is included in the count of the city in order to square it out. So the Gemara says, if it's because there's a structure there, so just say that the reason why it's included is not because of the cave, it's because of the structure. The Gemara says, no, let's no, when you use the cave to fill out the size of the house, it doesn't have its 4x4 amos yet, and therefore the cave is included. I guess the opening of the cave is included with part of the structure to be at least a total of 4x4 amos. And Omer Rav Huna Yeshvei Tzrifim, people who live out in huts, Ein Moedidin Lahen Ella Mi Pesach Bateyam. Right, when you measure for them, you measure from their houses. In other words, normally when you're in a city, right, you don't measure from your house 2,000 amos. You measure to the end of the city. Right, so if you have a bunch of huts or these tzrifim that are out in the fields, so it's not considered to be one cohesive unit, which is one town, which you go ahead and measure from the ends. Rather, each one gets 2,000 amos from their little hut. So Meisir Rav Chizaz a kasha says v'yachnu al yardei mi beis hayashimos. So it says there, and Bnei Yisrael they camped around the Yarden from Beis Hayashimos. So it says Rabbi Chana said that place Vahavi Tlasa Parsi at Tlasa Parsi. It's 3 parsa by 3 parsa, a large area. All right. The Tanya right, when they would go ahead and go to the bathroom, right, they wouldn't do it in the camp. Rather, they would do it outside the camp. So now 3 parsa by 3 parsa is more than 2,000 amos. So they would travel basically outside the 3 parsa to go to the bathroom. Now wait. If you're measuring each one as individual, so how can they travel that far to go to the bathroom? That's beyond their 2,000 amos. So Amarle Rovo, no. So Digle Midbar Kamarto. Well, you're talking about when they were camping out in the Midbar. Since it says over there they encamp by the words of the Shem and they travel by the words of Hashem, so therefore it was like it was all permanent. It was kavua, and therefore since it was permanent, therefore it was considered to be one camp, and you didn't measure from the individual houses. Rather, you measure from the outskirts of the machane. And Amar Rav Chinna bar Rav Kan, Amar Rav Ashi, Im Yesham Shlosh Bechitzos Shel Shnei Batim.
So Yoav.
One second. That's it. And if you have a case of where there are at least 3 chatzeros, right, and each chatzer was consisted of 2 houses, then that's already considered to be a collective group and not individual. Yes.
So when they were traveling in the midbar, so to speak, was there no such thing as a tchumim?
No, so they had tchum. So they had tchum, but the tchum only was counted from the edge of the machana. It wasn't, because normally, let's say you have people in temporary structures in these tzrifim. Yeah. They're traveling or they're going camping, whatever it is. So you don't measure, you don't take it, and let's say there's 15 tents, right? So you don't measure from the outskirts of the tents 2,000. Rather, you measure from each individual because it's really considered to be 15 individuals. But since they were Bnei Yisrael, they encamped al pi Hashem, that was considered to be a temporary structure, or a temporary encampment, and not temporary.
Oh, you're talking about the camp. I thought you were talking about according to the person. Okay.
Right. Fine. Omer Rav Yehuda Omer Rav Yoshvei Tzrifin v'hoichim midbaris chayahin ein chayim. So speaking of those people who live these like Bedouins, or these Yoshvei Tzrifin, the Halchim Ibarios, their lives aren't Chaim wasn't their lives aren't real. Why? Because there's questions about their wives and their children if they belong to them. Why is that? So Tanya Hachas and learn. The people who live in the Tzrifin, people who live out by the graves, right? Courtesy who lies with an animal. In other words, he lies with an animal, he lies with anybody. And we'll soon see that, since the people are frequently not home and they're known not to be home, so therefore there's opportunity for them not to be faithful. So my time was the reason they didn't have bathhouses and they would have to travel very far distances to go ahead and travel, and therefore when the men will go ahead and travel, then the I guess other men would know that the women are home alone and the other husbands would not be home soon. Rabbi Yochanan Omar Mipnei Shemagarshin Zelazeh B'Tvila, right? Because they saw when they would go out to the mikvah, and since they go to the mikvah, they can go ahead and meet them there because they would they would travel together. And my Benai was an afternoon between Rabbi Yochanan and Ula's opinions. Right? If you have a river close to the house, so then they would still go out to bathe. But when the women would go to the mikvah, that would be close. So therefore, that wouldn't necessarily give opportunity. And Amar Rav Huna says, Rav Huna, Kol Ir Shein Ba Yerek Ein Talmid Chacham Rashei Ladurba. Any city that does not have vegetables, right? A Talmid Chacham should not live there. It's not good to live there because vegetables are good for a person. So the name of the Yerek Malia, are you telling me that a Yerek is good, right? Vegetables are good. But Tanya in the Brisa, Shlosh Marbin is a Zevel. There are three types of foods that go ahead and increase. The Zevel person has to go to the bathroom. The Kaifin is a Kaima, and basically causes a person bad posture. The Nightlin Echad Mechamesh Meyois Mimor Einav Shaladam takes away 1/500th of his vision. The Elu Hayden, these are it. Pas, kibur, you have coarse bread that wasn't made with fine flour, the sheikher chadash and nubir, and the yarek, and vegetables. So you see, vegetables are not a good thing. So like kasha, betumi v'karti, habasha yarki. So one is a case of a shum, right, like garlic, and karti are leeks, and the other is other types of vegetables, right? So the garlics and leeks are good, but the other vegetables perhaps are not good. Kedetana is learned by so shum yarek, kareshik chatzi yarek. Right, garlic is healthy, and karishan and leeks are half of our what's it called? Our leeks are like half as healthy as the garlic, and neeretz known neeres samchayim. And some say if something is like a radish, right, then it is to be a samchayim, which is a good medication. A radish is really not good. So lakasha kambealin kabiyamos. One says maybe one is with the leaves. That's not good, but the roots, imamos are the roots, right? The mothers, the roots are good. And kamiyos akama and kamiyos like or some say that maybe they're healthy in the summer, but bad in the winter. Fine. And finally, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, Kol Ir Sheyesh B'Malos Samarodes Adam Vehema Adam Shabbat Mesim B'Chatzi Mehem. A town that has a lot of stairs and to go up and down, right? Those basically people die in the early years because of the age, quickly because of all the heights, the going up and down, the traversing. So they die early. Maybe they age quicker. And Amrav Vahuna Bered Yavishua Hani Molyasa Debe Beri Debe Narash Askunam. Right? They had the stairs of the heights in between Debe Biri and the Debe Narash, and also he aged very much from that. Fine. Now we're going to next blot or so, which we're going to get, which take us to the Mishnah. Is a lot of fun Gemaras, and now we change a little bit. So now be a lot of pictures, right? So Taner Rabbanan Bo L'Rava Marbia B'Yeribu Olam. Now, when we discussed, right, we said, okay, you have houses. Not every city is made of perfect square or a rectangle. Go ahead and make a square that includes the most outer house, and you have to make straight lines all the way around, and then from there you go ahead and you measure out your tchum. So when you go ahead and you square off the city, you square it by the squaring of the world, i.e., right, you're going to make a northern border, you're going to make a southern border, and east and west. So in other words, you go according to the to north, south, east, west, and not anything else. So you give the north to the north of the world and the south to the south of the world. And a way to know that is Egla b'tzafon v'akrav b'daram. Right? You go ahead and you look in the constellations and you find the Egla, right, the calf in the constellation, that is the most further north, and the Akrav, the scorpion tail, is Daram, is in the south. Now, if you are like myself or many others, I'm sure, Rabbi Yossi, and you don't know the different constellations, you won't be able to do it. So Rabbi Yossi, okay, here's what you have to do. You have to go there and find out which days have the longest sunrise and sunset, or the longest daylight and the shortest daylight. So what does he say to do? So Rabbi Yossi, if you don't know, go at basically constellations and to square off the world, what should you do? Merabo kamin hatzkufa. You go ahead and you use the seasons. Ketzad, how so? Chama yoytze b'yom aruch v'shakas b'yom aruch. Right? Go ahead and see the points as where the sun rises on the longest day. So let's say the longest day is, I don't know if it's sometime in July or August, or I guess over here in the northern hemisphere by us, north or south, right? So if you mark off the point right in the horizon, right, where it comes up, right, and it's that angle, and here it sets right over there, and you mark those points. Zehu pnei tzafon. So if you mark those two points, that is north, right? And you draw a line from one to the other where they come, that is considered to be north. And chama yoytze b'yom katzar, v'shakes b'yom katzar. And then you go ahead and you see when the shortest day in the winter of daylight, of where it comes up and where it goes down. Zeu pnei daram, that is the southern, the southern line. And so therefore, and then the southern. So you have the northern. Now we know where the south is. So since you have where the north and south is, Zeu Pnei Daram, and Tkufas Nisan, Tkufas Tishrei, and then when you have the equinoxes of Nisan, which is was in March, and Tkufas Tishrei, which is in September, the equinoxes, Chama Yaitze B'Chatzi Mizrak V'Shoicha B'Chatzi Marav. Those days you should have the sun rise exactly in the east and goes down exactly in the west. Shenamar, as the pasuk says, Hailech El Daram V'Soivev El Tzfon. Right. So it says over there, it goes to the south, and then it circles V'Soive to the north. And what does that mean? So it knows it goes to the south during the day, right, when it's in the sky. V'Soive El Tzfon, and then it goes back to the north, right, when it's in the night, i.e., under the world when you don't see it. And Soive Halech HaRuach, and then it says it goes around the horizon. So Elu Pnei Mizrach Pnei Marav. And this is referring to the east and the west. Sometimes it goes over there, over in the sky. Sometimes it goes underneath when you don't see it. So, for instance, right, you see I'm going to show you this picture in the art scroll, right? So you see over there that during the time you always have the sun orbiting, or what appears to be going around the earth. But sometimes you have more. Right, during the summer, it goes more of the travel is above the earth, or I guess during the daylight, as opposed to the winter, where it's shorter above the earth as opposed to behind it when it's darkness, and that's when it travels around. So it does travel around. So sometimes it's when we see it, and sometimes when we don't. However, Amar Rav Misharshia L'snai Lahali Klali. This rule does not always apply. The Tanya lo yotza chavim ye'elam mikerem mizrachit tzvainis v'shaga b'kerem ma'ariz tzvainis. That rule which you said, if you find the day which has the longest sunlight, and you see where it rises and you see where it sets, and that's the northern side, that's not necessarily true, because it doesn't go all the way in the furthest most north, and it doesn't set in the furthest most south. And it also doesn't set also in the case of the south, so you don't have the full side, and that is not the most northern side. So in other words, this way, it's you're not able to go ahead and basically calculate exactly according to that where exactly the north is and where the south is. Fine. Omar Shmuel says Shmuel. Ein tkuvas Nisan noifelas elo ba'arba riva hayom. So now we talk about different tkufas, right? There are different seasons, right? Each season, each year is divided When we talk about years, right, we're not talking about our lunar our lunar years that we use our calendars. Rather, the seasons go by these solar years, right, which is a 365 day. Now, so there's two of us, Nisan, right? There's the spring, summer, fall, and winter. Now, so Tkufa of Nisan, right? Nisan is the spring. When it comes out, Ella be'arba revi hayom. It comes out. It begins during one of the 4 points of the day. Ob tchilas hayom, ob tchilas halayla. Either at the beginning of the day or the beginning of the night. In other words, the beginning of the day would be, let's say, at a perfect day would be 6 a.m., right? And the tchilas halayla would be at 6 p.m. Or at noon in the day, or at midnight, at 12 at night. So these are the different times of the days. So when it comes out, right, as we'll soon see, that the way the seasons, the amount of days and hours in them will come out, that whenever the Tkufas Nisan falls out, it always falls out at the starting point of one of these, either 6, 12, 6, or 12. The Ein Tkufas Tammuz, Neifelas, and then next one after the spring is now the summer. So the summer does not fall either at 1.5 or 7.5, whether it's during the day or the night. So in other words, either 1.5 hours into it, because we'll soon see it's the amount of the tkufa is a full amount of days plus a certain amount of hours, an hour and a half, so now it's going to have to move an hour and a half up. So now, therefore, instead of being at 6, it can be either at 7:30 or it can be at 1:30 a.m., right? Or vice versa in the AMs or the PMs. The 8th Tkufas Tishrei, Nofelas, and Tkufa of Tishrei, then the fall does not fall, Ella, B'shlosh Shos, B'tisha Shos. Right? No, it's another hour and a half later, either at 3, right? Or 3 or 10, right? I think it's 3 or 10. At 3 o'clock, or is it? Yeah. Actually, 9, right? It just says, right? B'shlosh Shos, either at 3 o'clock, or 9 o'clock, right? And then whether it's the day or the night. And then finally, Teves, Nofelas, and then also Teves, the winter does not fall out. Either at 4:30, right, a.m., or 10:30 a.m., or 4:30 p.m., or 10:30 p.m. The day night. The ain bein tkufa tkufa ella, and why is that? Because ain bein tkufa tkufa ella tishim v'yom echad, 91 days, right? The Sheva shows a mefta. So each day, each season is basically is going to be 91 days and 7.5 hours. So if something, let's say, started, let's say Tishrei, let's say 1 year, that it started at, let's just say 6 p.m., right? Was the first season. So the next season, which is 91 days, so days always come out back to the 6 p.m. plus 7.5 hours. So therefore, it will start at, if it was 6 p.m., it will start at 1:30 a.m., right? Because it goes past it, it will be 1:30 a.m. would be the start of these summers. So that's the reason why we had all these rules, is because each season is 91 days and 7.5 hours. Right? And the amount of the tkufa that goes into the next season, right, is only a half hour. In other words, there are different constellations, and you might have because there's different constellations per the day. So per the day, you might have a constellation. The constellation might be split between 2 seasons, but at most be a half hour. V'amar Shmuel, you'll never have the Tkufas Nisan, which falls out during Tzedek, during constellation of Tzedek, which is Jupiter. I don't know the different constellations. Because if you have when that occurs, that Tkufas Nisan falls out during Tzedek, then you will have the trees will be broken. I guess it'll be bad for the trees. And also you won't have Teves, the winter, come out during Tzedek. They won't dry out all the seeds. Right? Things will be planted and it won't grow. Right? And this is only true when I guess there is a new month during that either comes out during the constellation of the Levana or B'Tzedek, either during constellation of the moon or Jupiter. Fine, 2 dots. So that was that, discussing constellations and north, south, east, and west, and the different seasons. Now, coming back, right, now it comes like a different type of difficulty or outside information, knowledge you have to do. Now we're going to get into geometry. We're getting into geometry and measuring. So Tanra Abanan, you put on your math hats now for this Amud. So Tanra Abanan, ha merabeas ear oisasa kamin tavla merubas. You're going to go ahead and square out the city, right? You're going to try and go ahead and when you go ahead and square it, right, you have to make it like a square tablet. What do you mean? The chayzu marbes tchumen, and then you go ahead and you make the tchumen squares. Make those like a square, right? In other words, what are we saying? What does this mean? That you make it a square, right? You see the pictures, right, in the art scroll, right? So you write first. You make it a square, the city, right, and then you're going to make the tchumen squares, right, and then we're even going to basically, all right, actually look at this, and then we're going to make, these empty areas right here, like in the corners, we're going to make those squares, like almost like this, right? So that's what the Gemara is going to explain now. So now is first you square off the city, then you make the tchumen, north, south, east, west square, and then those corners we're even going to square. And this will afford us extra space. So let's see. And now, when you go ahead and you measure the tchum, right, you shouldn't go ahead and measure right from the corner, because if you take from the corner, right, let's say you take from the corner right here, okay, and then you measure out 2,000, it's not going to go that far out, okay. Now, because we'll soon see, because if you'll only go 2,000, because then if you measure from the corner 2,000, you'll basically only have a circle around the city, because each part will only basically be like almost like the city is like the epicenter, and it has like a radius of a circle around it. So you don't do that. We want to get the corners. So how do you, by getting the corners, you basically square it off. You go as far as 2,000, but then you can come up and even get the corners. So let me mention about Paimama. Ella maybe tavlum rabas Paimama. Rather, you take those corners, right, and you make it a square of 2,000 by 2,000. Then you put that at the corner. So therefore, if you have a square now, right, like we said, these spaces over here, right, which is basically another square, is just not in there. So it's 2,000 by 2,000. So by math, this diagonal from here to the farther corner, that's 2,800 amos. It's not 2,000 amos, it's 2,800 amos, right? Because by using Pythagorean theorem, right, A and B, right? So it's basically 2 times, whatever it is, times 1.4, which would be which would be 2,800. So therefore, instead of measuring out 2,000, you basically put a square there, and then therefore you gain the diagonal. You would actually gain an additional 2,800. Nimtza er mishtakeres. It turns out that the city is rewarded for additional space. Arba meos amos lekan, right? And therefore you have 400 by the corner. And that was where is that? So if you look at the bottom, right? Imagine you have a town, right here, which is a good picture. No, sorry. Okay, we're gonna look at this, concentrate this picture right here. Those of you who have the picture in number 7, right? Number 7. So first you have the city. Now the city is circular, but then you make it corners. So from the corners, actually, if it was the radius of 1,000, and then you add the corner, right? That's an additional 400 amos, right, onto it, because I said it's 1.4 times the base and the height, right? The base and the height is 1,000. That it's 1,400 when you square it off. So you gain that 400 right there. Right? Right. So he said, Arba amos lekan, the Arba amos. The arba meos amos lakan, right? And then you have another what's it called? Then you have another 400 amos here. And therefore, it turns out, because instead of being 20, then you have another 2,800. So it turns out that you get more. It turns out that since you have now, right, the extra 400 plus, right, the plus 2,800, right, as opposed to measuring from the edge of the city, right, where the city ends, just if you just measure from the circle, right, you would have just measured out 2,000. Now you have an addition of making corners twice. So now you have the 400 plus the extra 800. It turns out that you're gaining 1,200 beyond what it would have been. So from the edge of the city, it's actually 3,200 amos from the edge of the circular city you gain in the corners. So by squaring off twice, that is what you gain. And Amar Abaye says Abaye, right? And also you find this in a city which is circular, right? Which is basically 2,000 by 2,000, which has a diameter of 2,000, which is the case we just explained. So that was the case which is explained of Abaye, where you gain that amount from a circular city. Now, Tanya, we learned in the Brisa. Now we're going to talk about the cities of Levim, right, which was mentioned in the Torah. There's actually, which we learned out the 2,000 the Tchum from, because they had 2,000 outside. So Amar Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yasi, Tchum Are Levim Alpaim Amo. The Tchum of the cities of Levim was 1,000 in each, right, of all sides. Semihem Elef Amo Migrash, and take away 1,000 from them. So first, excuse me, it was Alpaim Amo. It was 2,000 amos in each direction. And Semihan, take from there, Elef Amo Migrash, 1,000 of the Migrash, 1,000 of the area that they were not allowed to plant them. They had to leave open. Nimsa Migrash Ravia. It turns out that the Migrash, right, that they had, right, the amount that they left open was a quarter of Hashar Sados Sikram. The rest was fields and vineyards. Now, this doesn't make too much sense. Well, you have to understand this. Wait, how is that, right? You just said it was 2,000. And 1,000 of it had to be left open. So it turns out the left open part was a quarter of the parts that were planted of trees and vineyards. Now, according to my math, right, if you have 2,000 and half of it has to be left open, and the other half, so it doesn't seem like it should be a quarter, it seems like it should be a half. So you have to understand. So what is going on here? So Minohani Mili. From where do we know this? Rav Damarkar, the pasuk says, Mikir ha'ir v'chutza elef amasaviv, right? It says you leave it open from the wall of the city outside at 1,000 amos. Amar Torah, saviv v'seir elef, right? Surround the city with 1,000 amos of open. Now, nimtza migrash ravia palgi havi. What do you mean? I don't understand. How could you say that it turns out that the city, right, that the amount left open, if it was, you had to have 2,000 out there and 1,000 had to be left open, that 1,000, that the left open area was a quarter of it. It seems to be that the leftover area was was half of it, right? 1,000 out of 2,000. So Gemara says no. So now we're going to give a couple of different terutzim. So first there is Amar Rava Bar Ada Mishoichas Birli. So it says Bar Ada, who is the measurer, he explained to me. Okay, let's take it for example. Let's say you have a city of 2,000 amos by 2,000 amos. Okay, so 2,000 amos by 2,000 amos. Now, tchum kamahavi. How much is a tchum? Right. So he says shitzar is 16. All right. So those of you, so in other words, 16 million square amos. Right. If you want to say, but we can just call it each. We'll call each million. We'll just drop the million for a minute. So let's say you have here. Let's look at this this picture here. Okay. So this picture over here, so you see the city is 2 by 2. All right, let's take out the 2,000 by 2,000 because that's, right, 4 million. It's 2 by 2, which is 4. And then you have each direction, right, the north, south, east, and west. You also have 2,000 amos, and they're by 2,000 amos. So each one of those are also 2 by 2. 2 by 2 is 4, and there's 4 of them, one to the north, south, east, and west. Okay, so now basically you have 4 million, or 4 in the middle, right, 4 square in the middle, and then you have 4, 4, 4, 4. Okay, so that's 16 around it and the one in the middle. Okay, now we're working backwards. Now karnas kami havin, and now wait, But then you also have these corners, right? These corners here, right? How much are these corners? Well, obviously this is, 1, 2 by 1, 2. So that's 2 by 2, which is 4. So you, in addition to have those 16 to north, south, east, and west, you also have another 16 to northwest, northeast, southwest, southeast, right? So that's another 16, right? Or in this case, 16 million in this case. So you have 16 of that and 16 over there. Dal timni techumim. Now take away. Now we have some of the area that has to be tchum, right? We said which area had to be left over, right? We said the 1,000 in the middle, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Imagine those boxes, right, that are closest to the city, right? Those are the ones that are within 1,000 of the city. So all the ones that are basically touching the city. So that's 8, right? That's 8 out of all the others is 32, right? So daltin tchumen. So take away from the tchumen v'arba kronos, and then take from the corners. So kamihavi tresar. So that right then you have in 4 in the corners, right, which will basically look like this picture right here, this one. So you have the city, and then these is open area, right? So you have the city is the black, and then the open area, I believe, is basically those 1,000 amos all the way around the city. So that's 8 out of, right, and all the area around it we said was 32. So 8 out of 32. So nimta migrash ravia tfei mitilsaninu. Well, what do you mean, right? So if 8 plus 4 is 12, and we said there was 16 plus 3 is 32. So I don't know about your math, but 12 is more than a third of 32, right? It's larger. It's right. 12 is a much larger percentage, right? 32, it's not a quarter, right? It's not a quarter percent. It would be 12 out of 48, right? It's 12 out of 32. So nimta migrash ravia. So tfei mitilsaninu. It's more than a third. So I see arba demas shadilayu. So if you include, right, the 4 of the city, right? So add those into it. So till now our math was 12 out of 32. Oh, so let's add the 4, right? The 4 million amos in the city into the number 32. So it's 12 out of 36. But Gemara says like hati still tilsa hati. That's a third. So Gemara says, misavaras beria kamar. Who says we're talking about a city that's square? The igla kamar. We're talking about a city that is a circle. A city is a circle. So kam meruba yesra again. How much is a square? Right? For simple math, how much is a square? The square area of a square more than a circle? Ravia, it's 1/4. So dal ravia minayu. So therefore, go ahead and take away a quarter of the 12, right? If we say take away a quarter of the 12 million as we left open, so pashlu tisha. So if you take away that the city was not it was not square, so therefore the area around it is not square. So therefore, instead of being 12 million amos around it, right? Because it's the 8 plus the 4 corners, which would be 12. Take away a quarter of that, which is now 9. So 9 out of the total 36 is exactly a quarter, and therefore that was the statement meant. The statement meant in a city which is around it, and the migrash around it is a quarter, including the city, is a quarter of the total area that can be used by the city or grown outside of trees and orchards. And Abai Yomar, he gives another teretz. That was one teretz. You also find it even a city that was 1,000 by 1,000 amos. Okay, so now remember, even though the city you get 1,000 amos, the length around it you still get 2,000, right? So instead of being squares north, south, east, west, it's going to be more rectangular, right? Such as this picture right here, right? Because obviously you still have to measure. It doesn't matter how big the city is, right? The city is 10,000 amos by 10,000 amos or 1,000 amos by 1,000 amos. You still have, right? You still have to go out 2,000 amos in each direction. So it turns out that those spaces, those rectangles, are not 2,000 amos by 2,000 amos wide. They're actually 2,000 amos long by 1,000 because that is basically the size of the city. So Abai says, it's 1,000 by 1,000. So how much are the tchumen areas? So Timni, that is 8. Why is that? Because 2 times 1 is 2, right? 2 million. And there's 4 of them, north, south, east, and west. So therefore, it's a total of 8. So Kranas Kamihavi. And how much are the corners? Those are still 2 by 2 because it's 2,000 amos here, 2,000 amos here. Then it creates, the corners are still are 2,000 by 2,000 over here, right? So therefore, that's still 16. So 16 million for the corners and 8 on the sides, right? Karnas kamihavi, that's Shisar, right? So dal arba tchumen v'arba dekarnas. So therefore, go ahead and take away 4 for the tchumen, the one closest to the city, and the 4 corners. So kamihavi, that's 8. Kamihavi timnaya. So that's 8. But wait, we said 8 out of how many? It was 8 plus 16 out of, which is 24. So it's 8 out of 24. So the Gemara says tiltahavi. That's still only a third, not a quarter. So the Gemara says misavaras b'Ravia kamar. Who's talking about a city that's square? The iglu kamar. We're talking about a circular city. And kamaruva yesel eagle Ravia. So how much more is a square than a circle? That is a quarter, right? So dal Ravia pashulashisa. So therefore, take away a quarter of the 8, and it only becomes 6. And therefore, the Shaitim asking Marba Ravihade. Therefore, 6 out of 24 is considered to be 6 out of 24 is 1/4, which is exactly what we said. And Ravina Omar, my Ravia, what does it mean? A quarter, Ravia de Tchumen. It means a quarter, right, of the a quarter of the open space, right? In other words, so if you only have the space on the outside, not on the inside, right? Not including the corners. So therefore, that also comes out like this picture over here, right? You don't have the corners are not filled in. So therefore, only the areas next to the city are left open, but not the corners. And therefore, all of those are open. And therefore, that would turn out to be a quarter. And Rav Ashi Omar, so my Ravia, so he says, Ravia de Karnos, right? He says a quarter of the, so he says when it says to be a quarter, it only means 1/4 with the corners, because that was only a corner of those that were left open. And therefore those were not included in the migrash. So Amalei Ravina Rav Ashi Saviv Ksif. It says over there Saviv. It has to be the migrash has to be Saviv the city. So my Saviv the Kranos says no. What does it mean when it says that it has to go all the way around? So it says it just means Saviv. It just means the corners, right? Even if it just only the corners were left open according to Rav Ashi. It was opposite. It wasn't the sides along it. It was only the corners were left open, but not the parts adjacent to it. So it says, how can you have the parts adjacent to it not being left open? It says it has to be open, saviv, around it. And doesn't saviv mean anything adjacent to it around it? So he says, no, saviv means the corners. Dilo temach. If you don't say that, so what about gabi ola? By the karbanos, it says over there, the zorak es hadam. So he says, you go over here, you throw the blood, al mizbech saviv. All right, on the mizbech saviv. So hakanami savi mamish. Do you say it has to go all the way around? Elamai savi. It doesn't go all the way around the mizbech. Elamai savi means savi dekranos. It goes on the corners. And hakanami my savi dekranos. So over here, what does it mean? Corners means the corners. So by the migrash, it means the corners. And Omar le Rav Chavivi Mechuznoi Rav Ashi says Rav Chavivi from Chuznoi to Rav Ashi. Va'ika marsha dekranasa. Right. What about the areas that go out, right? In other words, that if it snows, that the whole area is not exactly 1,000. You have areas that go out, which they went ahead and squared. So the Masi Gluasa, or we're talking about a case where it was exactly a circle, Revia, but you have to go ahead and square it. So even something which is round, nevertheless, you have to go ahead and square it. Same with Damirna Chazina Kaman Revia Vada Mirabia, right? But even though we look at it as if it were square, we're measuring out, but is it exactly a square? It's not exactly a square. So therefore, to go ahead and say the dimensions, we're not really referring to the dimensions of the city, right? Only when measuring, but when we're taking the calculations in terms of compared to the other area, that was not necessarily, we're talking about as to when it was or was not squared. And Amarle Rav Chaniloi Michuznai Rav Ashi. So Michli, let's see. So kamun rabu yesal eagle. How much is a circle, right? Or is a square more than a circle? Ravia. It's 1/4 greater in terms of the the square area, right? Sahani tamni meya. But if you go ahead and the amos, right? How many timni meya? Shis meya v'shisit ushivin nechei til sahavi, right? So if you think about it, right? So when you have 2,000 by 2,000, so the corner, the diagonal corner that we said, you gain an extra 800, right? Because it's 2,800. But that's only if everything was all square, right? So that's only if it's all square. But however, if it was in the case of a circle, then it would go down by it would be a quarter of it. So shismeya. Then it will come out to 600 Vasishin, right, and 666, right, and not 800. Summerlay, right? And so he says to them, Hani mili bigula migula rivua. This is only true talking about a case if it was the area of a circle, if it was a circle in a square. But if you're talking about the diagonal, which is more, right, then it goes more. Right? If you have every am of a square, right, comes out to an am and 2/5 in the diagonal. So if you look at that picture, that's a picture on the bottom, right, of the art scroll here, right? So when you have the case of when you're looking at, I guess those points, just refer to those points. When you have the square goes out of between A and E, the amount that EC extends beyond AE is not necessarily considered to be more than the right. It's only 2/5 more, right? So if we have every am is only 2/5 more, that is only referring to when it's a circle around a square. But if it's square added to a square, then it would be 2,800 as opposed to be I guess 2,666. So that was only the case if we're a square to a square. But if it was a circle to a square, then it would be different. We'll stop here. This Mishnah, I guess I have to chazer my geometry to get this last nakuda here. But we'll stop here. Mitzvah. So tomorrow. So this is actually today's daf, and then so I think tomorrow it gets a little easier. All right, I think it slows down a little bit. So we'll see how it goes tomorrow. So Mitzvah tomorrow, same time. Everyone have a good day and a good moed.
A good morning.